Hey, welcome back. If you're here, it's probably because at some point in your life, being good didn't save you. It cost you. I want to start with a story that still sits heavy with me. Years ago, I watched someone I considered my closest friend slowly destroy himself by always trying to be the good guy. He gave second chances that weren't earned. He explained himself to people who never listened. He sacrificed his peace for people who barely remembered his name once they were done taking from him. For a long time, I thought that kind of loyalty was strength. I thought endurance was noble. I thought if you just stayed kind long enough, the world would eventually reward you. It didn't. 3 years later, I ran into him again, and I almost didn't recognize him. He wasn't angry, he wasn't bitter, he wasn't broken anymore either. He was calm, focused, ruthless in a quiet way. And he said something to me that never left my mind. The world didn't change. I did. I stopped being easy to break. That sentence hit harder than any betrayal I'd ever experienced, because I realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't just his story. It was mine. And if you're honest with yourself, it's probably yours too. Right now, there are two versions of you living inside your head. There's version 1, the one who explains themselves. The one who apologizes even when they've done nothing wrong. The one who tolerates disrespect just to keep the peace. The one who keeps hoping people will finally understand, finally change, finally appreciate you. You bend. You compromise. You overgive. You tell yourself you're being mature, kind, patient. But somehow, the more you give, the smaller you feel. The less people respect you. Then there's version 2, the quiet one, the composed one. The one who doesn't argue, doesn't beg, doesn't chase. They don't announce exits. They don't explain boundaries. They don't need approval to move on. When something no longer aligns with their self-respect, they remove it without drama and without guilt. If we're being real, you've been living as version 1 for far too long, and it's costing you your edge, your confidence, your power. You've been soft where you should have been sharp, kind where you should have been calculated, available where you should have been distant. There's a reason thinkers like Machiavelli warned about this centuries ago. When he said, "It is better to be feared than loved," he wasn't promoting cruelty. He was pointing to something deeper: control, boundaries, the ability to stop being the person who breaks for everyone else. Today, I'm going to walk you through how to awaken version 2, the ruthless version of you. Not reckless. Not heartless. Ruthless in the disciplined sense. The version people feel before they ever understand. There are 8 internal shifts that separate the person who gets used from the person who cannot be manipulated. Each shift will demand that you let go of something you once thought defined you. And yes, parts of this process will feel uncomfortable, like you're burning old identities. But if you stay with me through this, you'll walk away different. You'll stop searching for peace in other people and start generating it internally. Because the truth is simple. The world will break you unless you become ruthless. Before we go further, I want you to lock something in. Drop this in the comments right now. I will not break again. Let's start with the first shift. And this one alone changes everything. Stop giving yourself to the ungrateful. For most people, the real weakness was never their heart. It was where they placed it. You weren't too kind. You were kind in the wrong direction. You poured energy into people who consumed your presence but never respected it. You helped. You forgave. You explained. You waited. You thought consistency would earn appreciation. It didn't. In the psychology of power, anything given too freely gets subconsciously devalued. People don't measure worth by effort. They measure it by cost. When access to you is unlimited, it loses meaning. And the moment someone senses that you need their approval or connection, the balance of power flips. That's how weakness is born. Not from failure, from emotional dependence disguised as kindness. There's a reason Machiavelli warned that people are quicker to offend those who love them than those who can impose consequences. The ungrateful don't exploit you because they're evil. They exploit you because you make it safe to do so. They know you'll stay. They know you'll forgive. They know you'll rationalize their behavior with excuses. They're just stressed. They didn't mean it. They're going through something. That's not compassion. That's self-deception. Here's the part most people don't want to hear. People remember pain more than kindness. They respect consequences more than explanations. Predictable mercy makes you invisible. Every time you tolerate disrespect, you train others to see you as disposable. Every time you explain your worth, you confirm that it's negotiable. This is why the good often get broken first. Not because kindness is weak, but because kindness, without boundaries, invites destruction. Ungrateful people aren't hunting your strength. They're hunting your guilt. They twist empathy into leverage. They make you feel selfish for protecting yourself, and if you let them, they will drain you dry while calling you unreasonable for finally pulling away. So, hear this clearly. You do not owe loyalty to anyone simply because you once cared. Your care is not a right. It is a privilege, and privileges are earned through consistent respect, not emotional history. Everyone else deserves your absence. Distance is not punishment. It is correction. Detachment is defense. Indifference is consequence. When you stop answering every call, stop forgiving every lie, stop explaining every silence, something interesting happens. The ungrateful panic, because they can no longer feed on your emotional reactions. That's when the power shifts. You become the one who decides who gets access and who fades into irrelevance. And in a world obsessed with attention, control over attention is dominance. The strongest people are not the most available. They are the most selective. They conserve their energy like a weapon instead of wasting it like a wish. Every ounce of effort you pour into the wrong people is power stolen from your future. Withdraw it, reclaim it, rebuild it. Let them wonder what happened to your warmth. If they ask, the answer is simple. It froze the moment you saw the truth. Some people deserve your distance more than your devotion. Drop this in the comments before we move on. My kindness has limits. Let's move forward. Because once you stop giving yourself to the ungrateful, something else surfaces. Pain. And this is where most people fall apart. They think pain is proof that something went wrong, that they were unlucky, that life was unfair to them personally. So they complain, numb themselves, or try to escape it as fast as possible. That's why pain breaks them. Ruthless people do the opposite. They turn pain into power. Pain is the only teacher that never lies to you. It doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't flatter your ego. It strips you down and shows you exactly where you're weak. And most people hate it for that. But here's the truth no one teaches you. The difference between the broken and the powerful is not how much pain they've experienced. It's what they did with it. Weak minds drown in pain because they keep asking, why me? Ruthless minds ask, what is this showing me? Pain is not punishment. It's information. Every betrayal reveals where you trusted too easily. Every heartbreak exposes where you gave power away. Every loss shows you what you were clinging to that was never stable. Once you see pain through that lens, it stops being something you fear. It becomes something you use. This is why ruthless people don't waste time searching for fairness. They don't expect closure. They don't wait for apologies. They understand something critical. The world does not owe you healing. It offers you lessons. And pain is the most valuable currency you'll ever receive. You either invest it into becoming sharper, or you waste it complaining about how much it hurts. The people who rise after destruction aren't lucky. They're strategic. When they get betrayed, they don't spiral. They study. When they fail, they don't collapse. They analyze. When they're hurt, they don't chase answers. They build discipline. They ask questions most people are afraid to ask. What pattern did I ignore? Where did emotion override logic? What weakness did this expose in me? That's how pain transforms into precision. This is the dark psychology of transformation. You don't heal by feeling better. You heal by becoming stronger. Most people cry to release pain. The ruthless reflect to weaponize it. They don't hate their enemies. They observe them. They don't run from mistakes. They dissect them. Every disappointment becomes focus. Every heartbreak becomes emotional discipline. Every loss becomes strategic clarity. Pain is the forge. Dominance is the result. And here's the part that changes everything. Once you survive your own suffering without running, no one can control you with fear again. Think about that. Manipulation relies on pain avoidance. Guilt relies on emotional weakness. Rejection only works when you're afraid of being alone. But once you've sat with pain, once you've faced it head-on and lived, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. People can't threaten someone who's already survived worse. They can't control someone who doesn't fear discomfort. They can't manipulate someone who understands their own darkness. That's why the calmest people often carry the most dangerous energy. Not loud, not aggressive, grounded, steady, unshakable. They've already burned what used to control them. When you walk into a room after that transformation, people feel it. Your silence weighs more. Your gaze doesn't flinch. You're not reactive anymore. You move like someone who's been through the fire and came back sharpened. Your scars stop being shameful. They become armor. So the next time life hurts you, don't curse it. Don't numb it. Don't run from it. Sit with it. Study it. Ask yourself one question. What advantage is hidden here? Because every moment of agony carries a seed of dominance, if you're ruthless enough to cultivate it. Drop this in the comments before we continue. My pain builds power. Now, once pain stops controlling you, there's another trap you have to kill. And this one is subtle. It feels harmless, even virtuous. The need to be understood. This hunger keeps more people weak than failure ever could. You keep explaining yourself, clarifying your intentions, defending your choices, hoping that if you just say the right words, people will finally get you. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people aren't trying to understand you. They're trying to categorize you. They don't listen to learn. They listen to label. They listen to find angles. They listen for emotional leverage. Every time you over-explain, you hand them information they can use against you. In psychological dynamics, understanding equals control. When someone knows your motives, they know how to influence you. That's why ruthless people speak less. They let others guess. They let others assume. They let others project. And in that confusion, they remain untouchable. Power does not justify itself. It does not argue. It does not defend. The moment you feel the urge to explain yourself, ask why. Usually, it's because part of you still seeks validation, and the second you seek validation, you give away authority. The most intimidating people you've ever met didn't talk much. They didn't rush to clarify. They didn't correct every misunderstanding. Their silence created tension. That tension created respect. Weak minds beg to be seen. Strong minds allow themselves to be misunderstood. Because when people can't read you, they can't control you. That's why, throughout history, leaders and strategists mastered ambiguity. They spoke less than they knew. They acted more than they explained. Every unnecessary word you speak reveals emotional blueprints. It teaches people how to disarm you. Transparency feels honest, but it invites dissection. And dissection always kills power. You do not owe anyone clarity about your silence. You do not owe anyone explanations for your distance. You do not owe anyone comfort while you evolve. Let them misunderstand. Let them label you cold, arrogant, detached. Those labels become armor the moment you stop correcting them. Control lives in restraint. Silence is not weakness. It's weaponized composure. It unsettles people because they can't predict you. And uncertainty forces caution. That's psychological dominance. The people who truly value you will never demand explanations. The ones who demand clarity are usually looking for control. Once you stop trying to be understood, something unexpected happens. You begin to understand yourself. Your energy stops leaking. Your presence becomes heavier. Your words become deliberate. And when you do speak, people listen. Drop this in the comments before we go further. My silence speaks power. Now let's talk about the shift that separates emotional freedom from emotional slavery. Detachment. This is where most people panic. Because they confuse detachment with coldness. They think it means you don't care, that you've lost your heart, that you've become empty. That's not what detachment is. Detachment is control. Begging for attention, love, reassurance, or closure is how powerful people lose their position. The moment you chase what's walking away, you shrink in the eyes of the person who already decided not to value you. Every message you send trying to fix things, every explanation you offer to be understood, every emotional plea for clarity, all of it hands over leverage. Detachment is the ability to walk away from anything that threatens your self-respect, even if you wanted it badly. Especially if you wanted it badly. Most people confuse attachment with loyalty, but they're opposites. Loyalty is strength. Attachment is dependence. The world trains you to believe that fighting for people proves your worth, that persistence equals depth, that staying no matter what makes you honorable. But in psychological reality, the one who chases always loses power. Begging broadcasts weakness. Weakness invites exploitation. Ruthless people don't detach because they lack emotion. They detach because they refuse to be owned by it. When someone pulls away, they don't argue. They observe. When someone disrespects them, they don't plead. They disappear. Silence becomes their sword. Absence becomes their message. In a world fueled by emotional manipulation, detachment is rebellion. It terrifies manipulators because it cuts off their fuel source, your reaction. Once you stop reacting, you become unreadable, and unreadable people are feared. The most dangerous weapon is not anger, it's indifference. Indifference burns colder than hate and lasts longer than love. When people can't predict how you'll respond, they lose control over your emotional state. That's when the dynamic flips. You stop waiting. You start deciding. And here's what's fascinating. Silence from someone who used to react loudly is deafening. People notice it immediately, not because you confronted them, but because you didn't. Detachment gives you a strange authority. The authority to walk away with your dignity intact. True strength is being able to care deeply and still leave the moment your self-respect is threatened. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care correctly. Because when you stop begging, you stop bleeding. And once you stop bleeding, no one can feed on you again. Drop this in the comments before we continue. I choose peace over people. Now we move into something even more practical. Boundaries. Boundaries are not emotional walls. They are invisible armor. Without boundaries, your life becomes open territory. Anyone can enter, take what they want, and leave you drained. And most people were conditioned early to believe that saying no is selfish. That limits make you unkind. That belief is a lie. The absence of boundaries is self-betrayal. Every time you tolerate disrespect, every time you forgive without consequence, every time you let someone cross a line just to avoid conflict, you lose a piece of yourself. Weak people confuse tolerance with strength. Ruthless people know tolerance without enforcement invites chaos. A heart without armor is not noble. It's a target. People test the limits you refuse to enforce, not because they're evil, but because human nature always probes weakness. Boundaries don't keep the right people away. They reveal who never belonged. Boundaries are not walls, they are gates. They protect what's sacred inside you. They are clarity. And clarity terrifies manipulators because it removes leverage. When you calmly say no without guilt, you communicate dominance. When you remove access after betrayal, you establish non-negotiable worth. The powerful don't argue about respect. They demonstrate it through distance. Forgiveness without consequence is submission. Mercy without structure invites disorder. The moment you stop rewarding bad behavior with your presence, silence begins to work on your behalf. People who once disrespected you either adjust or disappear, and both outcomes restore your peace. Some will call it arrogance. Others will call it ego. The wise will recognize it as self-command. Boundaries teach people how to treat you. When you protect your space like a fortress, parasites vanish. Noise fades. Clarity returns. And suddenly, you see who actually values you. Not the ones who resent your limits, but the ones who respect them. Boundaries filter the loyal from the opportunistic. They make your presence feel earned, not available. To live without boundaries is to live without dignity. To live with them is to rule your inner world with quiet authority. Kindness without defense invites destruction. That's why ruthless people build armor, not out of fear, but wisdom. Because the goal is not to be liked. It's to be respected. Every boundary you set is a declaration. This is where my peace begins. Drop this in the comments before we move on. My boundaries protect me. Now we step into one of the most misunderstood weapons of power: silence. Most people are terrified of silence. They rush to fill it. They talk to ease tension, to prove confidence, to seek reassurance. Noise makes them feel safe. But every unnecessary word you speak becomes leverage for someone else. Silence is not empty. Silence is strategic. In a world addicted to talking, silence is dominance. When Machiavelli warned against revealing all your thoughts, he wasn't encouraging secrecy for its own sake. He was pointing out a simple psychological truth. The moment people can read your emotions, they can predict your reactions. And once you're predictable, you're controllable. Silence makes you unreadable. It creates uncertainty. And uncertainty forces people to hesitate. That hesitation is power. The quiet person in the room always holds more authority than the one performing for attention. Not because they're smarter, but because others don't know where they stand. And when people don't know where you stand, they tread carefully. This is the core of psychological dominance. When you say less, others reveal more. They over-explain. They justify. They project their insecurities onto you, trying to figure you out. They expose themselves. The ruthless understand this. They listen more than they speak. They observe more than they react. They act more than they promise. The weak rush to prove their point. The strong wait for the right moment. Every pause you hold in a conversation increases your authority. Every time you allow silence to breathe, You shift control. People instinctively fill silence with information, and information is leverage. This is why silence unsettles people. It forces them to confront their own thoughts. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to explain to be understood. You don't need to react to assert dominance. Restraint speaks louder than chaos. The loudest person is rarely the one with power. They crave it. The silent one already has it. History is full of rulers who understood this. The less they revealed, the more others imagined. And the more others imagined, the more cautious they became. Silence magnifies presence. When someone insults you and you don't react, it forces them to sit with their own behavior. When someone provokes you and you remain calm, their desperation becomes visible. Silence turns their aggression inward. That's why stillness is feared. In stillness lies control. When you stop defending yourself with words, you stop operating emotionally and start operating strategically. You shift from defense to command. Power doesn't argue its position. It makes others feel it. Silence makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability breeds respect. Drop this in the comments before we continue. My silence controls chaos. Now let's move into a concept that shocks people when they first hear it. Loyalty. Loyalty sounds noble, honorable, moral, and that's exactly why it's so dangerous when given blindly. Loyalty is only powerful when it's selective. The moment you give it without condition, it becomes your cage. Machiavelli warned about this for a reason. People are inconsistent, self-interested, opportunistic. To expect pure loyalty is to invite betrayal. Power belongs to those who understand alignment, not devotion. When you give absolute loyalty to anyone, friend, mentor, leader, you surrender independence. And once independence is gone, respect erodes. People don't admire blind devotion. They exploit it. Predictability is death in the game of power, and loyalty without strategy makes you predictable. True Machiavellian loyalty is conditional. It serves growth, protection, and progress. The moment it stops serving those, it must be reevaluated. Most people stay loyal out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of losing approval, fear of being labeled disloyal. And those same people are often the first to be discarded once they're no longer useful. The powerful understand something uncomfortable. They don't attach themselves to people. They attach themselves to purpose. Alliances shift. Circumstances change. And clinging to permanence in a world built on movement is weakness. Your loyalty should be a tool, not your identity. You apply it deliberately. You withdraw it without apology. This isn't cruelty, it's realism. The world rewards those who think, not those who feel. Never make yourself dependent on one person, one group, or one source of validation. Dependence kills autonomy, and autonomy is the root of dominance. Here's the key insight. The illusion of loyalty is more powerful than loyalty itself. It keeps others comfortable while keeping you sovereign. People believe you're aligned with them, while internally, you remain free. This is how empires are built. Kings fall because they trust too deeply. Subordinates are eliminated because they serve too faithfully. Friends turn enemies because they expect equality where hierarchy exists. When you're too loyal, people stop respecting you. They test your boundaries. They exploit your devotion. They stop fearing your withdrawal. Fear maintains order. When people know you can walk away without hesitation, your loyalty becomes valuable, not guaranteed, not assumed, earned. That's how respect is created. You must learn to give loyalty like a blade. Sharp, precise, used only when it cuts in your favor. Never give it like a gift. Gifts are forgotten. Weapons are remembered. This mindset makes you unpredictable. And unpredictability is the ultimate psychological advantage. People cannot manipulate what they cannot define. Remain a mystery in plain sight. Loyal in appearance. Sovereign in reality. The world will call this cold, heartless, calculated. Those words come from the powerless, the same people who worship those who betrayed them. Remember this: loyalty without strategy is self-betrayal. Your allegiance belongs to your purpose above all else. Drop this in the comments before we move on. My loyalty is earned. Now we arrive at the final stage. This isn't a tactic. It isn't a psychological trick. It's a state of being, becoming untouchable. This is the highest form of power, the point where everything you've learned merges into a new identity, quiet, grounded, unannounced. You no longer seek permission, validation, or recognition. Being untouchable does not mean becoming cruel to others. It means you stop being careless with yourself. The world will always test you. People will always push your limits. Life will always throw chaos in your path. The weak react. The fearful collapse. The unprepared break. But the untouchable move differently. They move like shadows. Calm. Precise. Unrushed. They are not owned by emotion, and they are not pulled into games they didn't choose to play. They don't fight the world, they rise above it. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology put words to it. A man who cannot master himself will always be ruled by others. True freedom does not come from being liked. It comes from self-command. To become untouchable, you must abandon the most dangerous illusions you were ever taught. The illusion that love equals safety. The illusion that approval equals strength. The illusion that being good guarantees fair treatment. The world does not reward kindness. It responds to clarity, self-possession, and power. When you stop relying on others to validate your worth, you reclaim your energy, and that reclaimed energy becomes a fortress. The untouchable build themselves deliberately. They invest in skill, discipline, and strategy rather than attention. They cultivate patience, presence, and internal stability. Their confidence is quiet because it doesn't need witnesses. They don't prove strength. They radiate it. This is where dark psychology reveals its core truth. People fear what they cannot control. And once you detach from reaction, explanation, and emotional dependence, you become uncontrollable. No one can predict your next move. No one can pull strings in your mind. No one has access to your inner state. You've removed the levers. The untouchable do not act from impulse. They act from position. Anger is measured. Fear is irrelevant. Desire is disciplined. Every response is intentional. Every silence carries weight. You become the axis. Chaos spins around you, but it cannot move you. This is why Machiavelli said that if you cannot be both loved and feared, choose to be feared. Not through intimidation, but through presence. Fear, in this sense, means people understand there is a cost to crossing you. You are no longer easily accessible. You are no longer exploitable. Untouchable means people hesitate before testing you, not because you threaten them, but because your composure signals consequence. You don't need retaliation. Your self-control is already a warning. No betrayal can destabilize you. No insult can define you. No manipulation can penetrate your armor, because you no longer live through the opinions of others. You are the product of your own discipline, strategy, and will. To reach this level, you must let go of the final dependency. The need to explain yourself, the need to forgive everything, the need to be acknowledged. You must rise above attachment, resentment, and the hunger to be seen. The untouchable do not flinch because they understand impermanence. Attention fades. Loyalty shifts. Approval disappears. They are anchored to themselves. And that anchor cannot be uprooted by circumstances. Once you reach this state, power becomes effortless. People feel it immediately. They either respect it or fear it, but they cannot ignore it. You are no longer a participant in other people's manipulation. You become the standard by which influence is measured. You move through life with the calm of someone who has nothing to prove, because you have mastered the only thing that ever mattered: yourself. Drop this in the comments right now. Nothing can break me. The world will continue to test you. It will betray your trust, challenge your patience, and punish your innocence. It will remind you that fairness is a myth, and people are unpredictable. But from this point forward, everything changes. You no longer give energy to the unworthy. You no longer beg to be understood. You no longer allow attachment to weaken you. You now have the blueprint. You stopped giving to the ungrateful. You turned pain into power. You killed the need to be understood. You detached from what drained you. You built boundaries that cannot be crossed. You mastered silence. You wielded loyalty strategically. And now you have become untouchable, not by luck, not by fate, but by choice. Every step you take on this path removes leverage from the world. Every challenge is no longer a threat. It becomes a tool. Every betrayal becomes a lesson. Every obstacle becomes proof that you are no longer available for exploitation. The untouchable are forged in fire, sharpened by strategy, and protected by self-mastery. Walk with clarity. Move with composure. Act without apology. Rise without announcement. The world will notice the difference, but only after you no longer need it to. If this guide brought you value, hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more strategies that make you stronger, sharper, and impossible to break. You are no longer the version that bends. You are the version that rules. Drop this final affirmation in the comments. I am untouchable now. Before you close this video, pause for a moment and listen carefully. The path you are stepping onto is not designed to make you popular. It is not built for comfort, and it is not meant to be understood by everyone around you. Choosing this path means choosing sovereignty over approval. It means accepting that growth will separate you from people who only knew how to relate to your weakness, your availability, and your silence when you should have spoken. And that separation will feel uncomfortable at first. You will notice it in small ways. Conversations will feel different. Certain people will grow distant. Others will question your change without ever asking what it cost you to make it. This is not a mistake. This is alignment. The world is structured to reward predictability, to reward those who are emotionally accessible, easily influenced, and willing to compromise themselves for harmony. The moment you stop playing that role, resistance appears. People who benefited from your old version will feel the loss before they understand the reason. They may label you cold, distant, or selfish, not because you became those things, but because you stopped being exploitable. Let them misunderstand. Power has always felt threatening to those who rely on control rather than self-mastery. What you are building now is not dominance over others. It is dominance over yourself. And that kind of power cannot coexist with constant explanation, apology, or emotional availability. From this point forward, your life becomes quieter, but heavier. You will no longer feel the need to fill silence. You will no longer feel urgency to prove your intentions. You will no longer feel responsible for managing other people's emotions. Instead, you will feel something unfamiliar at first. Stability. Not excitement. Not chaos. Not constant emotional movement. Stability. The kind that comes from knowing who you are, what you tolerate, and where you draw the line. There will be moments of isolation. That is part of the transition. When you outgrow a version of yourself, you temporarily stand alone between who you were and who you are becoming. Do not mistake that space for loneliness. It is recalibration. Every time you resist the urge to react, you reclaim authority. Every time you choose restraint over expression, you strengthen your position. Every time you walk away instead of chasing clarity, you remind yourself that your peace is not negotiable. Over time, these choices compound. Your presence becomes deliberate. Your words become rare and precise. Your energy becomes selective. People begin to notice, not because you demand attention, but because you no longer give it freely. Your silence begins to speak for you. Your absence begins to carry weight. You are no longer pulled into chaos. Chaos now adjusts to you. This is the quiet shift from vulnerability to untouchability. Not invincibility, not emotional numbness, but internal command. The world will still test you, it always will. But the tests will no longer feel personal. They will feel procedural. You will observe before responding. You will assess before engaging. You will move only when it serves your direction. You will stop reacting to provocation and start responding to purpose. And here is the most important truth to carry forward. You do not need to announce this transformation. True power never introduces itself. It reveals itself through consistency, through standards that do not bend under pressure, through calm that does not fracture when challenged. Let others speculate. Let others talk. Let others attempt to define you. You are not here to be explained. You are here to be experienced. As you move forward, protect your energy with discipline. Be generous with your focus, but only where it compounds. Be kind, but never at the expense of your boundaries. Be open, but never unguarded. Ruthlessness, in its highest form, is not aggression. It is clarity without compromise. It is knowing when to engage and when to withdraw. It is understanding that not every battle deserves your presence, and not every person deserves your access. You are not abandoning who you were. You are refining who you are. The softness that once made you vulnerable now becomes discernment. The empathy that once drained you now becomes awareness. The patience that once kept you stuck now becomes timing. You are no longer here to survive the world. You are here to move through it with composure. The world may never applaud this version of you, and that is perfectly fine. Applause has never been a requirement for authority. Adjustment is, and the world will adjust. Quietly, reluctantly, inevitably. When that happens, you will not need to remind anyone who you are. Your presence will already have done the work. So walk forward without announcement. Move without apology. Stand without needing recognition. You are no longer shaped by the world. You are no longer bent by pressure. You are no longer available for exploitation. And from this moment on, nothing that once broke you will ever reach you the same way again.